If you just had a newborn baby yesterday, congratulations. Little Jake or little Molly now owes the federal government or Canada as a whole $101,000. The bad part.
That's not the bad part. Believe it or not, the Liberals actually did something helpful for Canadians by capping NSF fees. But when 1/3 of the country is getting hit with those fees, and nearly half of Canadians report being just $200 away from not being able to pay their bills, you have to ask the question, is this the Liberals fixing a problem or reacting to one that they helped create?
Let's take a look. Minister Champagne announces new $10 cap on NSF fees and other measures to lower banking costs for Canadians. News release.
March 11th, 2026, Ottawa, Ontario, Department of Finance, Canada. The Government of Canada is focused on bringing down everyday expenses, including consumer pain points and unnecessary costs that can add up at the end of the month, such as banking fees.
Or Disney Plus.
Today, the Honourable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Finance and National Revenue, announced that the government's new $10 cap on non-sufficient funds, or NSF fees, down from as high as $50, will come into force on March 12th, 2026. With over 1 out of 3 Canadians incurring an NSF fee annually, this measure addresses a significant financial burden that disproportionately affects those living paycheck to paycheck, which, as an aside, these days is most Canadians.
On that note, new survey finds nearly half of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck.
There you go.
So, this is what the Liberals do. They create a problem and they say, oopsie, hey, we're going to come in with a Band-Aid to it to make you ever the more dependent on us. But let's move on. So this is the executive summary of the announcement, folks. So the issue, this is the problem that they say that they're trying to solve. Not the fact that the economy sucks, not the fact that there's a affordability crisis, but the issue is NSF fees represent a source of financial hardship for consumers. These fees disproportionately harm low-income Canadians and contribute to cycles of debt. And then it goes on to talk about this and, what they're going to do. And what this essentially means is if you put a check out or, you have an auto payment that's coming out and you go into overdraft, then normally you would get hit with a NSF fee that could be $10, could be higher than $10. Well, now it's no longer going to be higher than $10.
Which is a good thing. I never thought I would agree with François-Philippe the Chihuahua Champagne, but honestly, this is a good thing for Canadians that the Liberals have done. However, with 1/3 of Canadians requiring to pay an NSF fee in the past year, you have to ask why. What conditions are there that created this necessity?
Well, the other thing that I'm thinking of is, listen, you think bankers aren't taking into account NSF fees on their annual revenue sheet? Guess what's going to happen, folks? They're going to get it from somewhere else. I guarantee you that. But let's enjoy the sunny delight for the moment, right? But as Tanya says, what is this a real symptom of? Well, there's some clues, and I'm pretty sure nobody needs the clues, but we're going to look at them anyway because Carney's own government keeps dumping out the bad news for him and Canadians. So this is from a new StatsCan report, and this talks about public debt, household debt, and all other kinds of debt. So here's a section from this report. And it says household credit market debt outpaces income for the 5th straight quarter. So when Mark Carney tries to tell everybody, hey, we're doing great, wages are going up, it doesn't matter because household credit market debt is actually outpacing whatever gains that we get.
The seasonally adjusted stock of household credit market debt surpassed $3.2 trillion in the fourth quarter of 2025, ending the year 4.4% higher compared with the year prior. The ratio of household credit market debt as a proportion of household disposable income increased for the fifth consecutive quarter, climbing by 0.9 percentage points to 177.2% in the fourth quarter of 2025. In other words, there was $1.77 in credit market debt for every dollar of household disposable income. Although the ratio increased compared with the end of 2024, which it was 174.8%, it has not reached the record level set in the third quarter of 2022, 188.2%. Now, if you're wondering why I'm talking about the fourth quarter of 2025, that's because this report was just released on the 16th of March, 2026. It is the most recent that we have, and it's looking at the fourth quarter of 2025.
Now here's a graphical representation about this, and you can see that, oh look, since Mark Carney has taken over, household credit market debt is increasing again. And you can see the comparison from all the way back from 1995. Now, in the Harper years, you can see it was, going up and down, but it was relatively stable until Justin Trudeau takes over, and then it skyrockets. But here's another indication. And we talked about the mortgage crisis starting in 2026, and here's another indication of it. So you can see here, our MP, Ned Curick, he posts, since 2022, there has been a 425% increase in missed mortgage payments in Hamilton. And you can see the headline here, more than 4 times as many Hamilton homeowners are missing mortgage payments, CMHC. So this is a real problem here, folks. And it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening to the numbers in here, because the sad part is if people default on their mortgage and then the banks are having to come in and sell their home, well, that's clearing debt from the people that actually own it, but it doesn't mean it's a good outcome, because those people are essentially left with nothing, and probably another 100 or 200,000 on their mortgage that they still owe the bank even after the home is even sold, because it's lost all that value since they bought it in 2021 or 2022. This is what Canadians are having to deal with. This is what the mortgage crisis is all about, unfortunately. So this was one of the last pieces and sections in that StatCan report, and this should be the most concerning to the average Canadian.
The federal government's net financial liabilities as a share of gross domestic product, or GDP, which measures the remaining value of nominal liabilities after deducting financial assets at market value, in essence, sale price, ticked up to 33% in the fourth quarter of 2025. Meanwhile, the ratio for other levels of government reached 15.5%, up from 14.7% in the third quarter, as provincial governments demanded $30.4 billion in funds in the fourth quarter of 2025. In both 2024 and 2025, all other levels of government, excluding federal, demanded over $80 billion in credit market debt. Meanwhile, total government gross debt per capita crossed the 6-figure mark to reach $100,929 in the fourth quarter of 2025. By comparison, nominal GDP per capita stood at $78,858.
So what does this all mean? Okay, so essentially what this means is that if you take the total federal debt of around $1.4 trillion, and you add together all of the other provincial government debt
and territorial,
and you add that all together,
and municipal,
yes, all municipal, and you take into account payroll costs and vendor costs and everything like that, all the liabilities and dollars that these governments owe, not just in what they borrowed, but what they are set to owe their employees and pensions and all of that together, ladies and gentlemen, we've topped out at around $4 trillion. So that means if you just had a newborn baby yesterday, congratulations, little Jake or little Molly now owes the federal government or Canada as a whole $101,000. Yikes. The bad part,
That's not the bad part.
the bad part is that our GDP per capita, like total, is only at $78,000. So what does that mean? Well, that means we're not producing enough to actually catch up with our debt. We're actually 22% behind it.
So we're spending more as a government, all levels of government, than Canadians are actually making.
100%.
Well,
And
22%, you said.
well, yes. As in, absolutely. So this is the issue. And Pierre's been calling this out for years. For about 6 years, to be exact. And the issue is when governments continue to print money, inflation goes up. Inflation should be coming down now.
But it's not.
Mortgages should be coming down.
But they're not.
Mortgages are sitting there because they're trying to prevent inflation from going up.
Well, and that's why the Bank of Canada is not decreasing interest rates.
Right. The economy, as bad as it is, that should be coming down, but it isn't.
Right, because they are keeping it where it is in order to try and combat inflation, but it's not working. We discussed the consumer price index, I think it was about 2 weeks ago now, and the increase in food, well, it's gone up by 7.3% year over year. That's horrible. If you thought groceries were expensive last year, they're 7.3% more expensive this year.
And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what's going on. So this is Mark Carney. This is Mark Carney saying, oh, everything's great. Wages are going up. Wages can go up if you like, but if it's not outpacing the bills that people are paying, then what does it even matter? That's the problem.
Well, and the good thing is that if you have a family member or if you're on social media and somebody is trying to argue with you that everything's just sunshine and roses, you can show them those stats. They're linked down below, and you can show them the reality of what is happening with Canada's financial situation.